It's late at night, and once again, you find yourself staring at an unfinished task. You know you should be working on it, but instead, you grab your phone, mindlessly scroll through social media, or even decide that now is the perfect time to organize your desk. Just one more video, you promise yourself, or maybe a quick snack before you really get started. But when you finally look at the clock, you realize hours have passed. The deadline is now closer than ever, and anxiety begins to creep in. Sound familiar? Welcome to the vicious cycle of procrastination. But why do we insist on this behavior, even though we know it harms us? And more importantly, how can we break free from this destructive cycle? The answer isn't just about willpower or better time management. It's deeply rooted in psychology, neuroscience, and above all, our emotions. Contrary to what many believe, procrastination isn't synonymous with laziness. In fact, it's a defense mechanism against discomfort. When we perceive a task as difficult, stressful, or overwhelming, our brain interprets it as a threat. This activates the amygdala, the part responsible for processing emotions like fear and anxiety. In response to this unpleasant feeling, our instinct is to seek immediate relief. It's at this moment that we turn to distractions, offering instant gratification. A funny video, an endless scroll on your phone, a quick episode of your favorite show. This behavior is known by psychologists as short-term mood repair, meaning your brain prioritizes feeling good right now, ignoring future consequences. The problem is, each time we procrastinate, we reinforce this pattern. The brain learns that avoiding work provides temporary relief, making it even harder to get started next time. But there's hope. Breaking this cycle requires more than just discipline. It demands understanding the emotional triggers behind procrastination and developing strategies to trick our own brain. After all, if we can train ourselves to avoid difficult tasks, we can also train ourselves to face them. So, how can we reverse this pattern and finally take back control? Procrastination is often triggered by fear and stress, making the task ahead of us seem intimidating. To combat it effectively, it's essential to reframe the way we approach our obligations. Instead of viewing them as daunting challenges, break them down into small, manageable, and accessible steps. The key to taking the first step is to make it so simple that it becomes impossible not to start. It can be something as trivial as writing the first word of a text or organizing a single item on the desk. When we reduce this initial barrier, the brain no longer perceives the task as a threat, making it easier to take action. Moreover, celebrating small progress along the way strengthens a positive cycle of motivation and achievement. Small, accumulated successes create momentum and increase confidence. Often procrastination is linked to perfectionism. The fear of not doing something well can paralyze action. Therefore, instead of worrying about the final quality, focus on the simple act of starting. Tell yourself, I just need to write the first sentence or I'll dedicate only 5 minutes to this. This technique is based on the Zeigarnik effect, which shows that our brain hates unfinished tasks. Once we start something, there is a natural tendency to want to continue until it's completed. An unexpected strategy to overcome procrastination comes from research on dopamine and motivation. Instead of waiting for the right inspiration, try putting yourself in a situation even more uncomfortable than the task you're avoiding. For example, sit still for a few minutes without checking your phone or distracting yourself. Suddenly, the activity that once seemed difficult may appear to be a much more attractive option. Another effective method is to challenge your body and mind before starting the task. Take a cold shower, do an intense workout, or try solving a complex puzzle. These actions require effort and help shift the brain out of passive avoidance mode, making it more willing to face challenges. Once you get used to stepping out of your comfort zone, your resistance to difficult tasks decreases and procrastination loses its power over you. Procrastination is not just a matter of lack of discipline, but often the result of constant distractions that hijack our attention. If the phone is within reach, your brain will automatically seek that instant gratification by checking messages, social media, or watching videos. Small moments of distraction can quickly turn into hours of unproductivity without you realizing it. Therefore, the best strategy is to make procrastination harder than the work itself. Creating a distraction-free environment is essential. Apps that block social media, leaving the phone in another room, or activating Do Not Disturb mode can be simple but extremely effective measures. Additionally, keeping a tidy workspace and applying the Pomodoro technique to work in short, intense periods, followed by strategic breaks, helps maintain focus without mental burnout. Often, the biggest obstacle to starting a task is not laziness, but rather the fear of failure, insecurity, or perfectionism. In these moments, self-compassion becomes a powerful tool. Studies show that people who forgive themselves for procrastinating in the past are less likely to repeat that pattern. Instead of blaming yourself, ask, what exactly am I avoiding? What's the worst that could happen? Or how can I make this task less intimidating? Writing about these fears can help reduce the emotional burden and make the problem clearer and more manageable. Another major productivity killer is the false sense of abundant time caused by distant deadlines. To combat this, creating artificial deadlines can be an effective strategy. Committing to a friend, for example, by saying you'll send a task by a certain time increases the sense of urgency and prevents unnecessary delays. Additionally, making the responsibility public reduces the temptation to give up. If there is still resistance to getting started, an interesting technique is temptation bundling, which involves combining an unpleasant task with something enjoyable. Listening to a favorite podcast only while exercising or watching an episode of a series only after completing a difficult task can turn tedious obligations into more tolerable and even enjoyable moments. Small daily changes make a big difference. The first step may be hard, but once begun, the momentum to continue makes everything easier. Procrastination may seem tempting in the moment, but the relief and satisfaction of completing a task are always more rewarding. The harsh truth about procrastination is that it's not just about poor time management. It's deeply connected to how our brain handles stress, discomfort, and fear. However, the good news is that, just as procrastination is a habit, overcoming it can become one too. And you have the power to cultivate this habit by facing emotional triggers, breaking large tasks into smaller steps, and applying strategies like the do something harder method. In this way, you can reprogram your brain to act rather than avoid. The key is not waiting for motivation, but taking small intentional steps. Action creates momentum, and momentum fuels motivation. So, the next time you find yourself stuck in the cycle of procrastination, remember, starting is always the hardest part. But once you take the first step, you'll realize that the challenge wasn't as big as it seemed in your mind.